Hello and welcome to Films for the Very First Time. My name is Jordan. With me, as always, is Casey McGeorge.
Ac-
McGeorge? McGeorge? Are
Actually,
you
it's
there?
Abe Froman, Sausage King of Chicago.
Oh, yes. How are you today, Casey?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you, man?
Doing well. It's been a week. I'm starting to really enjoy doing these on Friday, like
When you watch them,
watching them on Friday. Yeah, it's like I get off work, I cleaned up a little bit after work on Friday, and then it was like, sitting down and watching a movie and grabbing the popcorn, and it's kind of been like a nice little uh start to my weekend, is watching these movies and kicking back, enjoying it, and um so it's been like a good what's it called, routine, a good routine on Fridays now to sit back and watch a movie. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about it. We are talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which came out June 11th of 1986, directed and written by John Hughes, starring Matthew Broderick, Mia Sara, and Alan Ruck. Those are pretty much the three leads, right? I mean, we get Jennifer Grey, we get whole bunch of people. We get Ben Stein appearing, Charlie Sheen in a small little moment. Louis Anderson even
yeah, the
appears, but
cameo by Louis
um,
Anderson. I saw that.
Christy Swanson is in this movie.
Wait, really?
But yeah, she plays just an economics student. She's like a random background person in the Ben Stein class.
The original Buffy. Wow.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean that's what we're talking about here. I'll come up with my own little summary here, but it is, a spring day before graduation, and Ferris Bueller is faking sick to skip school and wants to have, a good final time with his friends before graduation hits. And a lot of stuff happens that might derail that. But this is what Ferris Bueller's Day Off is about. Yeah, so I guess where were we when this movie came out? Well, I'm sure our usual listeners will know that I was not even born when this movie came out. But my favorite movie is Back to the Future in '85. This movie is a year after. Back to the Future was my parents' like first date movie, or one of their first date movies. And so that meant a lot to them. So they watched that a lot. I don't know about Ferris Bueller, but it was one that we had on VHS, and it was one that we watched a lot. And I would watch it a lot as a kid, um, growing up. And it's one that I own on DVD. I didn't bust out the DVD for this. I watched it on streaming. I want to get the Blu-ray. I don't have the Blu-ray. I don't think. Maybe I do somewhere. But it's yeah, it's just a classic in my opinion, and it's something that I just grew up watching. Now, Casey, where were you in 1986 when this movie released?
Okay, real quick before we get to where I was in 1986. Have you heard the wild rumor about Back to the Future? That's in no way true
Which
or coming true. That
what rumor?
someone had to deny publicly that they
No,
were
what
going to
was it?
do a remake with Tom Holland as a Marty McFly.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. That thing's been around for a while, and the reason why is people really like the Robert Downey Jr. Tom Holland dynamic, and everybody kind of started fan casting them as such.
Oh,
But here's what I'm going to tell everybody:
they got they're fan casting Robert Downey Jr. as Doc Brown.
as Doc, yeah, yeah, it's crazy.
I'd buy that for
Um,
$1.
it is not ever going to happen. Here's what I'll tell you, everyone: the people that actually own the rights to the movie of Back to the Future are Zemeckis and Bob Gale,
Yeah, they're
and
not
they
doing
have said that no remake or sequel is happening at all. They'd have to die for this to happen, and even then, I don't know who it goes to. If it goes to their children or whatever. Universal, I'm sure Universal has wanted to make a sequel or a remake and just cannot due to Zemeckis and Gale blocking it for so long. So yeah, I did see that Holland did have to come out because he also had to debunk the rumor that him and Zendaya broke up. So
Yeah.
um,
I didn't
that
know.
guy just had a whole bunch of misinformation, I guess, who was ever
Yeah,
asking. So
I hadn't heard about that until I saw the thing, and like I saw it about the Zendaya part first, and then I was like, and then when they talked about the first question they asked was like, "Is it true you're playing Marty McFly in the remake of Back to the Future?" And I was like, I get Zendaya, like I think I told you before, like I get the deal about Zendaya now, like I understand it, and I get her,
yeah, yeah.
like her and Tom Holland are really cute together. I get that, but I'm like, let's back this truck up. You talking about there's a remake of Back to the Future? Like this is the first I'm hearing about it. And then like I said, now I know. Like apparently, even in the whatever article I read, they were like, yeah, he was just making that up just to get something. And I'm like, what? Why would you do that? Like, why would you even do that?
Yeah.
And now and
If
now
I'm
I'm
Tom
hearing.
Holland, I'd be like, what?
And then, like I said, with Robert Downey Jr. as Doc Brown, that would be picture perfect. A crazy older like a crazy Robert Downey Jr. playing a Doc Brown. Like, yeah, I'd buy that.
Yeah, I'm not so sure I would even I don't know if it would work because of the not to go on too long of a tangent here, but when you look at how far back, like 85 to 55 was a big difference. I don't know if there's a big enough difference to go from 2024 to 1994 in a movie like this, because that's when it'd be time traveling back to. As scary as that sounds,
Go back
it
to
would
the
be
'80s. I think
1994.
if they go back to the '80s, it would be. The '80s were such a
Yeah, yeah,
different
they'd have to
time.
go back to the 80s,
I
but
think it could. But, and in all fairness, anybody who's listening to this podcast, who's listened for a while, we go off on little tangents. Like they know what they signed up for. They know what they're getting into. Okay, back to Ferris Bueller.
1986.
1986. I was 8 years old. I was about to turn 8 in October of that year. Uh, I didn't see it when it came out because I was 8 years old. Um, my parents and my mom was never really into. She wouldn't have been into Ferris Bueller at all, so I never saw it when it was released on VHS at all. And then I don't know, maybe it's one of those. I don't know. I know like it was big on HBO. I could have rented it, but by the time like it really got big or whatever, when I could have chose myself later to watch it, like in my late teens, early 20s, that was the late 90s. Like at that point, I'm thinking, why am I going to watch a quote unquote old movie from the 80s? You know, there's newer
Yeah,
stuff like 97. Like I said a couple weeks ago when we did Austin Powers, 97. I was like 19, 20 years old, right? Um,
hmm
I'm in the army. I'm in Fort Stewart, Georgia, or I'm in Korea. Like, there's new stuff to watch. Why am I gonna go back to watch a movie from the '80s unless it's like something major, like the Goonies that I remember that I love, or the Princess Bride? Like, I don't know. And then I know it's especially for a while. It was always on rotation there on like either HBO or like TBS, TNT.
TBS, I think.
It
Yeah,
was always one of those that you could watch at any given point in time. Like there was, you could probably flip through and just see that it was on at least once a month or so. Comedy Central, maybe something like that, and I just never really got around to it. No, it just it,
yeah,
I would just guy skip school. Like, okay, great. He gets on wacky misadventures. Yeah,
right. Well, while I was watching this the other day, I thought we don't get movies like this anymore, do we? That's just about like a kid skipping school. It's relatively down to earth movie. I know Ferris gets away with a lot of stuff here, but I'm talking about like a lot of movies that are releasing in theaters right now have to have some sort of hook or have to have part of a franchise, right? Like, or like you're looking at Barbie. It's not really a franchise, but it's based off of a toy that did huge. Oppenheimer's a real life story. Uh, but I can't think of like an original movie that came out recently. It's just like a mundane John Hughes film. We don't really have like a current John Hughes, who's out there making like Breakfast Club and
We don't have teen comedies
stuff like
anymore.
this. Yeah. Well, Super Bad and like that's probably the last one that was something like this, but
For
it's a little raunchy.
Yeah, I was gonna say we had raunchy teen comedies for a period of time.
Yeah.
We talked about it like Euro Trip, Road Trip,
American
uh,
Pie.
so yeah, the American Pie franchise, which there's like 10 or 15 movies in that franchise. Like a bunch of them were like straight to video
Yeah, only
and,
four good ones.
and
Yeah.
spin-offs, and there was just like I don't know, like there was way too many pies, way too many pies. Yeah, but and then so we have raunchy teen comedies. Like you said, Superbad was probably the last one. But then I can kind of understand it. People nowadays are like, why are we being so raunchy with teen? Like, you know, and I get it. That's how teenagers kind of are, like, or some
Right,
teenagers,
right.
not all teenagers, right? Some teenagers naturally are, and they're based off some sort of realistic experiences that some teenagers have. But and especially now, I don't definitely don't think it will work now because, like, if you think about it, they try to do some sort of teen comedy now. You'd have to be split upon like racial lines, and then you'd have like your geeks, your dorks, your jocks, your different religious sects, your goths,
And
your
kids these days don't really like there's studies out there that say like Gen Z and below are not of like obsessed about partying or having sex too.
not
So their whole version of a comedy would be totally different. Because like a lot of like the ones like growing up, right? When we're talking about American Pie, when we're talking about Road Trip, and we're talking about Superbad, it's about getting drunk and trying to hook up with somebody.
yeah.
But a lot of
We
kids
can
these
even
days are not as about
go
that.
back
So
to when I was a kid, and it was like Porky's and stuff like that. Um, Also, I think it might have a lot to do with uh, there just came this point where parents started, I don't want to say dictating, but kids' schedules started, especially earlier as a kid, started getting so regimented. So like kids were doing stuff. Some kids were doing stuff before school, especially if they're an athlete and they're trying to, like football, baseball, basketball, hockey, stuff like that, soccer. Some of them are doing workouts and practice before school. Then they go to school. And then there's all these different clubs and things, extracurricular activities involved in school. Then there's stuff after school, whether it's your bands, your student governments, your other organizations, your sports. Then there's other practices and things like that. Like, I remember as a kid, as a teenager, when I was in high school, I graduated in '96. Like, yeah, we did some extracurricular activities and we did sports, but then there became a point where, like, I wanted to get a job so I could have money as a teenager, right? So, like, I would go to school, do whatever. I played football after football season, and in November, right? I was looking for a job in the mall or something, and I had a job where I worked at Boston Market for a little while. I worked at a kids' clothing store called the Children's Place, stuff like that. That was so I could have money to do stuff. But other than that, like, you don't, between kids working or between a lot of regulations on it. I mean, I could only work like 4 hours a day. I couldn't work past a certain time anyway. They're trying to roll a lot of that stuff back now. Jesus Christ. But like, between them not wanting kids to work because they want them to quote unquote be kids, and they want them to, like I said, a lot of them, especially as competitive as it is for colleges now, and you got to have almost like this massive resume of stuff that you did, and they got to go volunteer, do this stuff, and they got to be involved in all these other extracurricular clubs because Joey down the street and Becky around the corner are doing the same thing, and they're all applying to the same colleges, and that can be the difference between getting in and not getting in. It's being a kid is nowhere near like what it used to be back in the day. And I'll get on a little soapbox
yeah,
here. Like, I remember as a teenager, like, not necessarily getting kicked out of the house, but like I'd wake up in the morning, especially like during the summer time off. I gotta leave the house. You gotta go. You're either gonna stay here and clean, or you go out. Nine,
Yeah.
10 o'clock in the morning, I'd leave with my friends. My mom didn't care if I went to the moon, as long as I came back that night.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't know the stuff we were doing. Thank God. She didn't know the debauchery and things we were getting into. But it was just like, okay, I'll call you later if I need something, and I wouldn't be seen until like dark. Now, it's different. So, I'm not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad. It's the world's changing. It's different.
All right, so we get our introduction here. This movie starts off right off the bat with Ferris, being checked on by his mom as he is getting ready to, convince her to let him stay home.
Before that, so I watched this on Paramount Plus streaming, and a I forgot how old the movie was until it came on, and I saw like how grainy it was,
The old Paramount logo.
and then the old Paramount logo, and I forget what it said. Like it was the companies that Paramount belonged to or whatever. It was at the
Yeah.
bottom of it, and I was just like, Jesus, this thing is old, and it's almost like 40 years old now, and I'm like, this is just ludicrous. Like I feel just incredibly ancient now. Yeah, but then Ferris trying to play sick.
Yeah, trying to play sick here. It works. He's definitely the favorite child, you would say, right? Like he is the one that gets away with stuff with his parents more than his sister does. Just the way they're even talking to him and the way he's responding to them at times is very like he's acting very young, with the way he's responding to them.
That's a difference between an older
Babyish voice.
and a younger sibling.
Yeah.
The older will probably
Yep.
usually get away with stuff. And I hate to say it, but at the time, that's the difference between having like a teenage boy and a teenage girl. Like, boys will be
Yeah.
boys; they can
Yeah.
do stuff like that. And teenage girls, they have to be very protective of. And this was, back in the day, protective and blah. Um,
Yeah. So we once his parents do leave, we get him explaining to the camera what he is. The best ways to get out of the situation, get out of school. And he says the clammy hands is kind of what sells the mom, right? And he's explaining to the camera, just licking your palms when you're bending, like leaning over, like moaning and stuff, and it makes them a little clammy, and it's not as scary enough to rush you to the hospital like a fever might be if you are able to force yourself to have a fever and all this kind of stuff. So he's like, this is like the easy way to get out of this.
have you ever played sick?
Yeah, yeah.
I never did to get. I was never able to get out of school. My mom was a teacher, unfortunately, so that just didn't quite work.
Oh,
Like if
dang.
I legitimately was sick, then yeah, like I was able to stay home. But I was never able to like, oh, I'm sick. Yeah, no, you're not. You're still going to school. Now, especially as an
Yeah,
adult,
I
have
would.
I faked some things to get out of work? Yeah, yeah.
As a kid, like I wouldn't do it a lot, but there'd be some times where you're just like, I would have like maybe a faint headache, and then I'd play it up a bit to make it seem worse than it was, to where I would stay home, and then it would usually go away because then I didn't have to worry about going to school anymore. Um, so I didn't never tried the clammy hands though. I never tried doing that or anything, but um, yeah, I've what would you say, exaggerated before to stay home. Um, but yeah, we get Ferris talking to the camera here. Something that I would say isn't in vogue as much these days as well, right? Uh, this type of thing in breaking the fourth wall in movies, I would say isn't as prominent this way, talking to the camera when it's not like a documentary. um, fourth wall breaks we usually get nowadays are more like meta jokes, Deadpool esque type stuff. Deadpool does talk to the camera sometimes, but like other than that, I can't think of many movies these days where the character just looks at the camera and starts talking.
But with Deadpool, that's at least part of him because that's what he did in the comics, I guess, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of organic with the Deadpool character. So like if I don't know what give me a movie that's coming out this year. I don't even know what
Ghostbusters.
yeah. So if like in all of a sudden in the middle of a new Ghostbusters movie that's coming out, Paul Rudd just like started talking to the camera, it'd be kind of weird. Like
Yes, yeah.
this was kind of weird, but they also established Ferris doing it to the camera like in the very beginning.
Very early,
So
yeah.
you just kind of get like, okay, like I guess he's talking to us. But yeah, like if Paul Rudd just either in the beginning of the movie or like halfway through the movie just start talking to the camera, be like, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah, so we see him like while he's explaining all of this, he's setting up some of the stuff that's going to happen later, right? I think he's like putting together the mannequin that's going into bed when he's talking about some of this stuff to us. And then we see him, going to get showered and he's going to call his friend Cameron. But before we see Cameron, I believe is when we kind of get the school reacting to Ferris being out. You know, um, yes, the teacher is Ben Stein. He's the one saying
I
Bueller,
think this was our first
Bueller,
introduction to Ben Stein.
Bueller. Yeah, maybe. Like in movie, I knew him growing up from this and the Red Eyes, Clear Eyes commercial.
Yeah,
What do you do for one of
I
the?
think that this might have led to that, and then not like he even had like his own. I think it was like a game show type thing on Comedy Central. I think it was like Win Ben
Yeah,
Stein's
win Ben
Money,
Stein's money. Yeah.
which I don't know. I mean, they had Alex Trebek. I don't know why Jeopardy didn't kind of hop on the Ben Stein thing. Maybe we're past the Ben Stein craze. There was like a
Yeah, I
period
think
in
we
like the
are.
late '90s or early 2000s. He was kind of big.
He's a little crazier now, I think you would say, like politically. Though he
Oh
was Richard
man, don't
Nixon's speech.
wait, what?
Yeah, yeah, he had a political career as the speechwriter and lawyer for President Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford.
Oh, so he's one of never. Yeah, we're not gonna touch
Yeah,
that. Never mind.
no, yeah, no, it was disappointing. What you see some of the stuff he said since then. So just maybe stay away from that if you want to keep Ben Stein in a personal memory. Um, so right after Bueller, then we get him asking for Fry, which is Cameron Fry, played by Alan Ruck, who is a hypochondriac and is, laying in bed worried he is dying.
How many
Um,
A name students are in this class? Jesus.
oh yeah, because they go through a few right before we get
Yeah,
to Bueller.
he was taking attendance in alphabetical order. There was like 9 or 10 people with a A, like that started A,
A last name,
and
yeah,
then it went to like Bueller, and then it went to like it just skipped like 3 letters.
right to Fry, yeah,
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 like, do a little. You can spread out a little more. That's all I'm saying. But
yeah, yeah. But this is Cameron Fry, played by Alan Ruck. I love Alan Ruck, by the way. He was always in this movie. Cameron is my favorite character, and he is the character I identified with a lot growing up. I was more of a Cameron hypochondriac, rule follower than a Ferris, who is a self-absorbed,
he's a dick.
rule
Let's
breaker.
just put it out there. He's a dick.
Yeah, he is. Um, but Alan Ruck, I love Alan Ruck. He appears in so many things
I
that
was gonna say,
I've watched since then.
What else would I have seen him in? Like he's got that face that is familiar. Like you know the face, you've seen the face,
Yeah.
and probably recognize the voice,
Well,
but I can't place him in anything that is like, oh
he
yeah,
was
that's the
in
dude from Philly.
two episodes of Psych. He's been in. You watched Psych, right?
Yeah, I think I remember that. I
Yeah. So he
I
was in.
think I remember hearing they were really excited to have him on there because they were like big pop culture fans and fans of the '80s and stuff
Yeah,
like that. So that for them that was like
he
a
was one of the
huge
he
deal.
was the one who is robbing the bank when Gus is stuck in a bank
Yeah.
during the robbery. He's the guy robbing the bank. He also appears later in the remake of Cloudy with a Chance of Murder that they do later in the final season or so. He's appeared in so many TV shows as like one-off roles, but I knew him also from growing up from Ferris Bueller. But then I was also an avid Spin City watcher back in the
Okay.
day, which was a show starring Michael J. Fox
Jennifer
and
Esposito.
yes, um, uh, uh, Richard Kind is in it,
Yes, yes,
and
yes.
yes. So I remember watching Alan Ruck is in that show as a character. So
Okay.
I
Now
watched it for Michael J. Fox,
I
and
think
I
I can
loved
kind of
having Alan Ruck in it.
yeah, I can kind of picture him in there now. I used to watch. I didn't watch
Yeah,
it all the time, but I would watch it when I remember it was on or like flip through. Like, oh yeah, that was a pretty good show.
it was. I like it all the way up to Michael J. Fox leaving, and I did not watch much of the Charlie Sheen years.
Oh, that's
But there you
right.
go. There's another connection to
Before
Ferris
that's right.
Bueller.
Before he got Two and a Half Men, he took over from Michael J. Fox
Yep,
in the last season or two of Spin City. That's right.
the last two. Yeah, and then when was Two and a Half Men? Because this show ended in 2002, so it had to be right after, right?
I'd say within, if I had to guess, I'd say within 2 years of that. Knowing how pilots work and everything, no more than maybe two
Two and a
years.
Half Men was 2003. Yep. So he went pretty much
Finished that
one
show.
season of like the fall season of not having anything. And then he was probably filming a pilot in early March,
Yeah,
and then
he was. Yeah, he was.
back on the air again.
He was probably auditioning, doing whatever, filmed the pilot, and then that's when they're like, okay, yeah. So
Yeah. So Alan Ruck is in this as Cameron. And then we are kind of introduced to the dynamic of him and Ferris, where Ferris is calling him saying, "Hey, come pick me up," because Ferris took this day off wanting to do a bunch of stuff, but he doesn't have a car, so he is kind of stuck with if Cameron is going to follow through. I'm guessing this was planned, right? He was going to skip today. Cameron was going to skip today, and he was going to call him, and they were going to have this plan to get out of school. And he's worried about Cameron kind of backing out on this. And Cameron is just lying there in his very 80s bed with his 80s voice messaging machine and telephone.
this,
And
oh, I'm glad you said that. Between the intro and the Paramount symbol and
yeah,
everything of the wood paneling station wagons in the beginning that we see,
yes.
this might be the most 80s movie to ever 80s in the history of the world.
Probably. Probably. Even the school looks very 80s.
Yeah, the payphones in high school and the the computer screens with just green letters on a black background because
Yes.
back then they didn't do anything else. They couldn't show any graphics or anything.
Yeah. Yeah, there was no like operating system really until Windows, right? Like when we talk about like the operating systems we're used to.
Well, I think Mac, whatever Mac used was, I think, the first one really. But
Okay.
back in the day, it was like you had to know like prompts and commands for stuff. The
Mhm.
size, the 5.25-inch floppy disk he put into his keyboard later.
Yes.
Uh, it's always funny when you hear people or see people online say that like people just associate the save symbol with saving, like especially a younger
Didn't
generation.
know it was a floppy like an actual thing. I've
Like
seen people like
we had,
not know
yeah,
it's a real thing.
we actually had to say like that was because that was the shape of the disc that we actually used to have to save stuff on. Um,
Yeah. I mean, look, I feel like I'm not even that old, right? I'm only 32, but I did have to deal with floppy disks. There's an era where I had to take those to school and like save my stuff on it and bring it home and put it in the home computer to continue working on my my paper or whatever during middle school.
Look, I
It's crazy.
remember 80s. Uh, there might be one computer in the classroom, right?
Yeah.
And everyone would get like a designated time. Like you would get like 30 minutes during the week, and everyone would have like a designated time. So it'd be like whatever it was, like Tuesday at like 1:30 would be your time to go. And I would like I would always play like Where in the World is Carmen San Diego on there. But
Yeah.
like yeah, or people would play Oregon Trail, stuff like that.
Yes. Yeah. Classic.
But
Um.
yeah, that like also how was he the only person in this area to have the internet? How is he hacking into the? How is he changing his days off in the computer from his home computer? Like we didn't have the internet back then. What is going on?
Is this one of the earliest forms of hacking in a movie?
Because also
Like, I
wasn't he
feel
in
like
War
it has
Games?
to be.
Wasn't Broderick in War Games?
Maybe. I know him also as Simba from Lion King.
He was
Yes,
Simba.
he was in War Games. Yes.
He was Simba
Yes, he plays.
in the
Yes, he
cartoon.
plays young, adult Simba. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that. But yeah, like because I think War Games came out couple years after this, and
83 it says actually. So it was
oh, so it
before
came out
that.
before this. Wow.
Yeah.
So I think War Games might have been the first example of hacking. Then, but yeah, like, but there was no internet. How is he connected to the school computer? Which I know it's a little ahead, but like, what the
It's
hell's
true.
going on here?
Yeah.
Like, how is this happening?
I don't know cuz in my life the internet's been there, so I bought it each time. Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so he's talking with Cameron. I like this part where Cameron hangs up and says, "I'm dying," and he immediately calls back and
You're
says, "You're
not
not dying."
dying.
Like he
Yeah.
knows what Cameron's thought process is.
Friendship
And
goals. That's friendship goals right there.
yes, Cameron does come over and he gets a little cheered up, right? Cameron looks like he's having a ball when he calls Rooney as as Sloane's father, Mr. Peterson.
But before we get to that,
Uh-huh.
this is set in Chicago or Sherman, Illinois, which is
Yes.
right outside of Chicago.
30 minutes outside of Chicago, yeah.
But quick other side note, in Kevin Smith's Dogma, right? He's a big movie buff and 80s fan, and he loved John Hughes films. So Jay and Silent Bob, their characters come from New Jersey, right? And they've seen all the John Hughes films, right? And they all take place in Sherman, Illinois.
Chicago.
No, they take place in Sherman, Illinois. So their characters in Dogma decide that they want to go to Sherman, Illinois. They don't realize it's not a real place. They travel all the way over there, and then they get there and they're like, "There is no Sherman, Illinois." But uh, okay, why is he wearing a Detroit Red Wings jersey in Chicago?
That's a good question. I was wondering that too.
Like that can be equated to almost like gang warfare. Like I'm not a big hockey fan, right? I follow the NHL playoffs and everything and the Stanley Cup because it's the Stanley Cup. Like that's cool. And if I have a hockey team, it's the new Seattle one, the Kraken, because they got a cool nickname, the Kraken. I like that. And no one can blame me for being jumping on a bandwagon, right? Because I got with them when they were branded. But I know like these teams are very tribal and like region specific and everything. So like to have someone in
Well,
Chicago who is a
I have an
Detroit
answer for
Red
you.
Wings fan is crazy.
I have an answer from you from
He,
Alan Ruck
he's actually a
himself.
Detroit Red Wings fan, isn't
He says the I did not grow up in Chicago. I never gave it a thought. John Hughes had spent some of his boyhood in Detroit. Hughes decided that Cameron had a horrible relationship with his father, but a great relationship with his grandfather who lived in Detroit and would take Cameron to Red Wings games. That's all it was, and it was never explained in the movie.
I'll buy it. I'll allow it. I feel like
And
Chang
some
that.
people also thought some people also thought he's doing it to spite his dad due to the bad relationship
That
with his
was
dad.
actually, once you said something about his dad, that was the first thing that popped in my head. His dad was probably like a big Blackhawks fan, so he was like, "F you, I'm gonna root for the Red Wings." But I know, like,
Yeah.
especially Chicago sports fans, like, they hate the Packers, they hate the St. Louis Cardinals, they hate the Detroit Red
Mm-hmm.
Wings, and the Detroit Pistons. Like,
Yep.
so when I saw that, I was immediately like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! What is going on here?" Like, but yeah,
I think it was Hughes wanted to get a Detroit jersey in there because he grew up in
yeah,
Detroit a bit, but and then he kind of was like, who could be one that would wear that? Oh, Cameron can because
yeah.
of this.
And then
So I think
once
that,
you look at it, like you said, with his dad and his grandfather probably taking him to Detroit games or whatever, like, yeah, I'll buy
yeah.
that. I feel like Chain with my big sombrero on. I'll allow it.
So Cameron comes over. They're at Ferris's house, um, and they're making some calls to the school. And I like this scene's pretty great because we're kind of introduced to Rooney, right? Who learns that Ferris is out for his ninth time this semester.
Yeah.
And he has a hate boner for this kid, right? I mean, I think
Okay.
most staff would.
Let's take a time out here real quick because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know or not. That was a horrible choice of words on your part. Probably
It's a
not
real
intentional.
word.
Yes.
It's a real phrase. It's a real phrase.
Do you know what has happened since with the actor who plays uh
No, I didn't look it up.
he was arrested. He pleaded no contest to trying to get an underage child to pose for pornographic pictures. And he's been
Really,
arrested.
the guy that oh,
He's been arrested several other times for failing to update his
damn.
where he lives on the sex offender registry. Um,
No, did
so
not know any of that.
I figured, like, I didn't think you were like making any jokes. Like, I'm not trying to impugn your character or
No,
anything,
no, yeah.
but that's why I was like, oh, that's a horrible choice of words, especially if anybody might know. Like, so he's kind.
And
I
he
mean,
still gets work. He was in Deadwood after all of that stuff. Still,
he's not getting as much work as he used to. Yes, but he still does get
yeah,
some.
not anymore.
Um, he was a decent character actor. He always played that weird, creepy guy.
Well, I guess
And
so.
then I guess he played a really good job, a really good role in Amadeus in the 80s. Like I think he was nominated for awards for that. But then, so as we stated, this is my first time watching this movie, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I remember when he got arrested and seeing his mugshot and everything that's come out since.
Really?
So watching this with that for the first time with that knowledge in my mind, right? I was
Yeah.
like, this movie just hits like I don't know what this movie would have hit like if I hadn't had that knowledge about him. But this movie hits a little bit different now that I know this about the guy who's playing him. And I'm
Yeah.
like, this is a little weird. Like,
Yeah, that's true. No, I did not know any of that. So,
ooh, yeah.
there
Like I
you
said,
there you
not
go.
your fault. By no means that is not your fault. But that's why I was like, oh man, that's. But yeah,
So he hates Ferris. Is how I'll phrase it going forward.
he does have a hate thing for Ferris, without a doubt. I love the secretary though.
Yes, she was really great. He calls Ferris's mom and says, "Do you know how many times your kid has been out?" And this is something that I quote sometimes. I guess is I knew this part pretty well. The 9 times, and then her responding 9 times, and him like confirming
While
the
he's
nine
picking up
times.
pieces of like lint off his desk and getting everything
Yes,
picture
he's like being
perfect.
real particular with his desk. And when Cameron calls as Mr. Is it Mr. Peterson or Peterman? It is Peterson. As Mr. Peterson, Sloane's dad, he thinks
It's Ferris.
this is Ferris.
I thought it was Ferris. Before that, before we jump on that,
Mm-hmm.
did you ever skip school or anything as a kid?
Yeah, didn't we already talk about that?
No, we took. Well, no, not play sick.
Oh,
Like,
like from school,
yeah, just like
like
cut
skip?
class or skip school or whatever.
No,
Did
no. Once I also in a really rural area, by the way,
so
and
you
had no car, so
couldn't
there
do
was
anything.
nowhere to
Okay.
go.
Did you
Yeah,
guys have like an
I wouldn't have
automated?
anyway.
Did you guys have like a system that would call the house if you missed school?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, we did too. I think just about every kid who grew up in the 80s and 90s had that, and especially like I, I never skipped school, but I always found it funny to see like kids who would try and get home, or especially would see like kids trying to get home in movies and TV to like erase the message before their parents got
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
before their parents would get there. But yeah, honestly, I wasn't sure if the automated message was just like a regional thing or if that was something a lot of other people experienced.
No, yeah, I experienced that, and that was back when we all had home phones.
Yeah,
Nobody really has a home phone anymore.
there was no voicemail. It was usually an answering machine that you had.
Yes, and it would play the message aloud while you're sitting there.
Yeah.
Um, that's how my grandfather still operates. By the way, he has no cell phone. He has a house phone with a voice message, machine, and that's the only way he answers the phone. Like if I'll answer the phone, like I'll call him, I'll get to the voicemail, and I'll say, "Hey,
Grandpa,
Pop
it's
Pop,
me.
it's Jordan," and then he'll answer the phone. Yeah.
That was the early stages of caller ID.
Yes, he does not have caller ID at all.
No, that's what it
He
was.
said that to
Who's
me.
on the phone?
Yeah, that was the only way to do it. Yeah. Um. So yes, Cameron is calling as Mr. Peterson, and he says that Sloane's grandmother has died, and we have a scene where Sloane gets pulled out of class for it, and she puts on a good performance about her grandmother passing. The nurse feels sorry for her, and
Why are they sending the nurse with this information? How is
I
this
don't
not
know.
like? How is this not like a vice principal or some person in the administrative staff? Like, why is the nurse going to let you know your grandmother has
Yeah, I
passed away?
guess we don't really know how the school is set up, but we have just Mr. Rooney
You see,
and
yeah, the
his
dean of
secretary, right?
students
Like,
and the secretary, yeah.
yeah,
But there's got to be at least one other assistant or vice principal or
you would
something. Like,
think.
it's a high school. There has to be
Um,
like
yeah, yeah.
one other administrative person somewhere in there. I don't know.
So of course I know this movie, so I know it was Cameron, but also I can now hear it in his voice when he's playing Mr. Peterson. And I'm like, oh, that's Alan Ruck's voice. But so we get to this point here where Ferris does the ultimate deception, I guess, here, because then Ferris calls on a separate line.
Because we don't know. We like me watching this.
Yeah,
I think
you have
it's
no clue who it
Ferris.
is.
I think it's Ferris Bueller on the line, right? Just like everyone else probably watching it for the first time. We don't know it's actually Cameron, and then Ferris calls, and you're like, wait a minute. And then like it cuts
Yeah.
to you see that it's actually like, Cameron is the one on the phone, but masterfully done by John Hughes. Like great way to
Yes.
put that
Yeah.
out there. But I was like, because even when he's like, oh, this is Ferris, I'm like, yeah, that's probably Ferris. And then he just starts horrible way to talk to someone's grandmother just passed away.
I yeah, once you produce the body, I'll let her I'll let her go. And Cameron holds it together pretty well where he's like, "You want to see a body? I don't quite understand." Like he's playing dumb. I also just love Matthew Broderick in this here with Ferris, where like when he's calling and he's just like, I don't know, like straightening up his hair. He's
Yeah.
like making sure he looks real good. Just a very like stuck up vain guy.
The suit threw me off though. Like I did
What,
not
putting on the
know
suit?
I didn't know Ferris Bueller wore a suit in this movie because every clip I've ever
Oh yeah.
seen, everything
Is with
I've
like
ever
the
seen, he's had like the
vest.
leather jacket and the sweater vest or whatever, and the vest like when he's dancing in the parade. Like he's had pretty much the same outfit on throughout the entire movie. And just him rocking the suit, I was like, one that just feels out of place.
Mm-hmm.
Just from everything I've seen and what I know of the character, right? Two, why is he no teenager's gonna put on a suit unless you're part of like the Young Republicans Club or something. Like, no.
Well, it was all part of the plan. That's how he shows up as Mr. Peterson.
He had
He
the
needed to
trench
wear
coat.
this
He could have
suit
worn
to sell
anything
it.
under it. He had the trench coat on and the
Yeah,
hat.
true. But I guess he wanted to sell it here. So you know, he calls just any really just to kind of rub it in too. Is like, hey, Mr. Rooney, can you? I'm sick. Can you have my sister like bring home any of the assignments I need? Like, I really want to be able to
Which
do
he's
my
not going to
schoolwork
do
type of
anyway,
thing.
probably. Yeah, but anyway.
No. um, but yeah, so we get that great phone scene there, and then he convinces Cameron to let him use his father's Ferrari because Mr. Peterson would not be seen in Cameron's car. Cameron's car is a piece of shit, he says. And he says, and that's okay because I don't even have a piece of shit. So he's like, I can kind of insult your car because I don't even have one. I want a piece of shit, but I don't even have that. But we're going to need to use your dad's Ferrari here.
I kind of get what he's saying as far as like I can't I don't have one and yours is better than mine for having a piece of crap car. I get
Yeah.
that. But also at the same time, since you don't have a car, you can't really talk bad about someone else's piece of crap car. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you can because he's your boy, and you're like that's probably the only person you can do that to. But you really can't because whenever you guys go anywhere, do anything, he's the one picking you up, so you guys can go someplace to do it.
Yes. Yeah. And he could have used the other car. They don't. Mr. Rooney probably wouldn't have paid much attention to that.
Unless he
It's
knew Cameron's car.
yes, unless he knows Cameron's car. But in my mind, this is Ferris manipulation here. Of I want a joyride, and this is the way I'm getting that joyride.
There's
I'm
like
going to use
13.
logic,
Yeah, there's like 13 of
but
these
yeah,
Ferraris made in the world, and I want to drive in this one.
yes.
Also, it wouldn't surprise me for whatever reason, especially ones we've already discussed, if Rooney would have known Cameron's car.
um. Yes. So then we get to a nice scene of them picking up Sloane and the kiss for daddy scene here where
I think that was a
Ferris
little too
asks for
much. I think that was, especially you're trying to pass
they
this,
kiss a little long, yes.
especially trying
They
to pass
almost
it off
blow
in
it
front of
here.
the dean of students there. Like, come on. Yeah, it might be a little too
And
much.
Rooney is like, so that's how it is in their family. Oh boy. So I was also thinking like kids would not get away with this at all today. Like we were talking about, you know, being out sick and stuff. Like I feel like with a lot of parents that can work from home if a kid is sick, and also ring cameras, maybe cameras in the house that people have, like it would be a lot tougher to. This movie could not get made today in that regard.
Not only that, but something that's come up during the pandemic, and I don't know if it was still going on. A lot of places were getting rid of, or there was talk about a lot of places getting rid of like snow days. So like I know you probably had
Yeah,
snow days as a kid, right? Where
yeah, yeah,
you got too much snow, you stayed home from school. But especially where everyone kind of went remote anyway during the pandemic, there were school districts out there that were talking about like, oh, if a kid's out sick, like we can still have a hybrid classroom where we can have kids in school, and if a kid's out sick and he's still at home, then he can just turn his computer on. He can still participate in class, and he can still get his assignments and everything.
because
And
that's
if
the first thing you want to do when you're feeling sick is log on and
yeah, and
listen to a boring
listen to Ben
lecture.
Stein tell you about the tariffs and everything, right? And then
Yeah.
if
What
if there's
about Ben Stein's teaching style, man? I mean, it's what and what was this? Anyone? Anyone?
and then
This was the
and then you got like if there's snow days, then okay, no one has to go into school, but we can still have school because everyone can still go to school remote. So that's another thing where it's like a lot of stuff wouldn't be able to happen. Plus nowadays with automated messages and schools having like portals set up. So like nowadays,
yeah.
a lot of schools have portals set up where parents can check in and they can check on their students' grades. They can add money to like their lunch accounts, like that. Well, that's how they add money to their lunch accounts and pay stuff. That's how they communicate with the teachers and the administration as far as like if their kid needs extra help, if they're not doing well, if they're doing great, if they need to have a meeting with them, stuff like that. So now, especially like you would have Ferris is sick, you would have Ferris's mom or dad would go right to his phone and his little app or to his computer, send him the school a quick message. Ferris isn't gonna be there today. He's out sick, right? Bam. And then there might be that phone call probably wouldn't be a phone call. It probably would have been communication through some sort of chat system on that portal between the dean and one of Ferris's parents of like he's been gone 9 times. What do you mean he's been gone 9 times? He's been absent 9 times. And then he can show her the dates. Hey, these are the dates and all this other stuff.
And we also have the Find My iPhone thing, right? So a lot of people track their kids through that too. So they would be able to maybe track Ferris
All the
that
times
way.
that Ferris was missed by like half a second, yeah.
Yes, by his parents.
Or by who's the dean there? Why did I forget his name?
By Rooney.
By Rooney, his mom,
Yes.
dad, stuff like that.
Yeah, because he has a few run-ins with his dad specifically because his dad works in Chicago. Um, yeah, so Cameron's like, "Hey, time to return the car," and Ferris is like, "No, we're going to Chicago." And this is how you know it was part of the plan here.
Not only that, word got around school so quick and
That he's out and
went
dying.
so wild about him being out. And it's like, that was just ridiculous. Like, he's either the most popular kid in the entire school, which is a possibility,
I
or
think
that
he
school
is. Yeah.
is crazy small for all of a sudden everybody in the school to know that all of a sudden he's out sick, and then it just blow up into like he's gonna lose his kidney. We're raising money to buy him a kidney. Who the
Yeah.
hell are you buying a kidney from?
Yeah. 50K is how much they say a kidney is
And he's going
in
around with like a
$1986.
Pepsi. He's going around
And
with
he's
a
going around
Pepsi
with a
cup.
Pepsi can.
Well, yeah, collecting change with a Pepsi cup to get $50,000 for a kidney. Where's this money going? Who's paying? Who are you paying $50,000 for a kidney from?
I love this too because like they approach, Jennifer Grey's character of the sister as if they don't know who she is because
That's the other
he's the
thing.
popular one.
Like they
She's
don't,
not popular.
but still there would be something by proxy where they would know like that's Ferris Bueller's sister.
I don't know. I had a fairly popular sister in high school and I mean, like, I have a very uncommon last name, so people would sometimes link us that way. But a lot of times, like, nobody would know. I was kind of more under the radar in that regard. So I could see, I related to this a bit with them having, like, no clue who she is.
Maybe,
Um,
but I think especially with it being, I don't know. I think maybe because like it's flipped, like maybe you're her younger brother or something. But remember, we're going back to the '80s and a time of great misogyny, where
mhm.
there would have been the aspect of "Don't touch her." That's Ferris's sister, and just the opposite. There would have been guys who have wanted to get with her simply because she was Ferris's sister.
Yeah.
So I think I get your experience, and I'm not saying it's not valid, but I think it might have been a little different had the roles been reversed, and you were the popular one, and
Yeah, maybe.
I think she still would have been known being your sister as compared to you being her brother, the other way around. But I could be
Mhm.
wrong on that. But I think in the misogynistic times of the '80s, I think it's a little different.
So they go to Chicago, and I wanted to know. I looked up. I said, "Is it possible to do everything that they've done
Oh,
in a
it's been done.
day?" Yeah, it has. Yeah, it's very possible. Looking at how much time they spent there, people did like walking from each place to each place. Um,
not only
Because they
that,
start out,
but
they
there was
arrive in Chicago by 10:30. That's when they park. Is about 10:30 a.m.
someone someone did it with a more updated version because Wrigley Field isn't in downtown, so to go like downtown to Wrigley Field to back to downtown like doesn't make a ton of sense. So I think when they redid it, they did the Cubs game first and then went to downtown, and they also planned it where that parade is a real parade.
Yes, yep, on weekend. It's usually on a weekend, so
It's
this is a
it's
little.
and they since they were dressed as characters from Ferris Bueller, they were recognized and they were allowed on a float in the parade.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they played Twist and Shout during the parade for them. But
That's pretty cool.
it went so far, it they found out what dates it could have been.
Yes, yeah, because they have. Well, they were able to figure out what days they were looking at the. So there's a few things here. This is supposed to be spring. They're talking about it's the last semester before graduation. They're graduating like next month, and you have this game that Ferris attends is something is June 5th, 1985,
Yeah.
right? So it's a little
Yep.
off there. It is also a little off because then the game that they actually filmed at when they were actually filming there was in September.
Yeah.
But these games did take place around 125, and that they, 3 hour game or so, you're looking at staying at Wrigley until around 4 something. Then they go to the Art Institute, which is a 13-minute drive. I'm not sure how long of a walk. Um, we see them take cabs and stuff. We see them. The longest walk they would have to do is from the restaurant to the Board of Trade, which is a 52-minute walk. And it actually puts them with the time that they did right around the exact time they would have been there anyway. So, like, it seems like it was pretty planned out. Now, of course, John Hughes is from the area, so he
Yeah.
probably knows
He has an idea of what
how this stuff would go. Yeah, so
but
if you're wondering, hey, it seems like they did a lot. It's all possible.
it's feasible. It's been done. People have recreated it. Not
Mm-hmm.
only that, but I guess it the June 5th date is possible considering, and I think I might have told you this about how my we just talked about having snow days, right? Where when it snows in a certain area, if it's too much snow, you get canceled. So in Massachusetts, we got 5 days a year. We get 5 snow days. If we went past 5 snow days, you'd have to make that time up, right? I think I might have told the story
Yeah.
before. So my senior year of high school, fairly decent sized city. I think we had like 10, 12 high schools or something like that. And the city had like one massive auditorium. So every year the auditorium is booked out for a couple of weeks, like 2 or 3 weeks straight. Like Monday, this high school is graduating. Tuesday, this high school is graduating. Wednesdays, this day's graduation club, right? And then any other events would bookend it either before or after. So
Mm-hmm.
my senior year of high school in 96, 95 and 96, we got blasted with like 2 or 3 blizzards back to back to back. We lost
Wow.
a ton of days for snow days.
So to make them all up.
But we ran into a problem. At least some of them did. So for us as seniors, once again, high school graduation dates are already booked, and then everything else is booked that happens, trade shows, Comic Cons, whatever they're doing, happens around those. So those other, like, you can't move, you can't take the graduate. It's not like the Buffalo Bills game, like yesterday, as we're recording this, got moved from Saturday night to Monday,
Yeah.
right? But it's not like
Sunday to Monday. Yeah.
yeah. But it's not like we could have done that with our graduation. They could have done it with, okay, we're going to move it from this Monday to like the following Wednesday, because there was probably stuff already booked in the auditorium. So it went back and forth for several weeks before they said, okay, here's what's going to happen. The seniors, you guys are going to get over. You guys will still leave school at the same time. Your graduation date won't change. You got over on us. Congratulations. Go be adults. Go out in the world and do great things. Juniors and underclassmen, you guys still have to make up those snow days. So they had to stay. I think in Massachusetts at the time, they could stay up until like the 4th of July weekend. So they stayed
Wow.
up until like the end of June to make up those days. So they stayed like that, like 2 or 3 weeks extra. So Chicago, very cold, gets a lot of snow. I'm sure they might have snow days, something in there, right? I don't know what the weather was like in 1984 and 85, but if they get hit with a couple of bad snowstorms, right? It's possible it could have pushed school to go until June before they would graduate.
It's possible, but what I would say
Not
with that
probable.
is I think they mentioned graduating like next month and graduating in June and or something like that. So
Yeah.
I do think it's still supposed to be like May or April, and the Van Steuben Day is usually the parade is usually in September. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of a day.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, yeah. So they visit. So they leave the car with two parking attendants who promptly take it onto a joyride, just as Cameron was worried
We're going to talk
they
about those
would.
guys later.
Yes. And meanwhile, then they go and explore the city. They go to the Art Institute of Chicago. They use deception to lunch at the restaurant, which is called like Chef Louise or something, Chef Queeze or something. And this is where Ferris's dad is also having lunch during this time here, and they just get out of it before being noticed. But this is also where they play a little bit of a phone game here to get seated by the restaurant as Sloan calls and asks for the guy that Ferris is posing as and
Abe Froman,
describes
Sausage
him as
King of
Ferris.
Chicago.
Yes, who looks like he's 18 years old. The guy wasn't really buying it until the phone calls. So they also go to the Cubs game and the parade. Go ahead.
I, I don't know. I, I have found a lot of times, at least in my customer service interaction days, I'm willing to call people's bluff on stuff like that because a lot of times it's just not real. So I might have been willing to let him call the cops or act like he's going to call the cops, and I
Mm-hmm.
might have been willing
Yeah,
to
then
let
Cameron calls acting like the cops, doesn't
yeah.
he?
I don't know. I'm just me. I'm more willing because a lot of times I know people just try and do stuff like that just especially nowadays. You know,
For
people are
TikTok.
yeah. But I'd be like, okay, that's fine. Go ahead. I'd encourage you to. Like I tell people that now, even as a yeah, go ahead. That's okay. I'd really encourage you to. But
Yeah.
just I want more information on Abe Froman, the Sausage King of Chicago.
Yes. Yeah, that'd be great. There's your spinoff. Go they go to the Chicago Cubs game where Ferris catches a ball and is on TV right when Mr. Rooney is not looking. He almost gets caught there.
Yeah, because he got some. He went
Um,
to an arcade and got some soda spit in his face because he thought a young lady was Ferris.
yes. Yes, a lady with short hair that had the Ferris haircut. He goes up there thinking, "I got you now." He also gets stuck at their home for a bit. So this is Rooney's journey, right? He goes to the home and he thinks Ferris is faking it, and Ferris has the whole thing set up with the message playing when you the little buzzer they have, right? Where he's like, "Oh, I can't come to the
The intercom
door right
system,
now."
yeah.
Yeah, and uh, look, it's obviously a recording because then the same exact the same exact thing afterwards when Rooney tries it again. But Rooney's gonna break into the house here. I understand he hates Ferris. I understand he wants to prove this wrong, but I feel like if I'm a principal, this is a
He's going way
not
overboard.
my yes. This is a not my job type of thing, right? Like, yes, I can call the parents. I can tell them how many times he missed, but I'm not going out of my way here.
You're about to commit a felony here. Like what's going on?
Yes. Yeah, breaks into their house, runs into their Rottweiler, uh runs into
Okay,
Jennifer Grey's
so
character.
let's talk about
Um
this dog here.
yes,
Love
Jeannie.
love dogs. No issue with them having a dog, a Rottweiler that's going to be protective of their house and go off on this guy. I guess my only thing is maybe might have made it a little better is if we knew the dog existed before this point.
Yes,
Um,
I
I,
would agree
I
with
guess
that.
that's
Yeah,
my
it comes
only
out of nowhere.
gripe about it. Really, is just the dog just kind of came from out of nowhere, and I guess it's not unexpected in the '80s for a family like that to have like a Rottweiler or Doberman Pinscher or something. But
Hmm.
like I said, I just if we would have known, if they would have just shown the dog earlier, so we knew there was a dog in the house, right? Like that,
Yeah,
I think that could have made it just a smidge better, But
just a
that,
little bit of setup.
yeah,
Like you see the dog maybe when Ferris is just laying around at the beginning of the thing.
he
You know,
feeds
like
he
he's at his pool.
he
He's
feeds the
doing all
dog
this
before he
stuff. Yeah.
goes off to take off for his day with
Yes.
Cameron or something, right?
Yeah. There
I'll
you
be
go. Yeah.
I'll be back, buddy. I'll see you later. Like you take care of the house or whatever. Stuff that normal people probably do when they feed their dog before they leave for the day, right? Just just let me know that this dog existed in the world. That's all I'm saying. And I
Yeah.
know that's a minor gripe. Like it's silly, but
It makes sense though, no, because I always was taken aback that it was their dog. Like when I would watch this, because you're like, he's never shown until this scene, and then he's shown again at the very end,
yeah.
only when Rooney. Yeah, like they don't focus on it when Ferris is arriving. They only focus on it when Rooney's right there.
Well, the dog also
Um,
didn't wake up until the
until
dog.
Rooney was there.
Yeah, the dog passed out and just so happened to wake up after you know Jennifer Grey closed the door again. So
Mm-hmm. So we have so then Jeannie is in there and she calls the cops on him and she's going to they think the cops think it's like a fake thing and she gets in trouble and brought in for this, which is a little over the top for if you're the cops. Nothing else
especially
going on?
especially considering we see that he left his wallet in the house,
They didn't even investigate this. No,
and Jeannie either when she came in at the very end is when she finds the wallet, which is possible. Like
I
that's
think that's
that's
when, yeah.
plausible. Like I can't, but yeah, there was nothing. So yeah, this wallet was sitting there, and a quick cursory search around the premises might have been able to find the wallet and prove that hey, who is this dude? And then I'm sure they look up. Oh, he's the principal at the school. Why is this principal inside these students' house? Like this makes no
These
sense.
young kids' house. Yeah, Rooney would have gotten arrested, just like real life. Okay, so that's what's going on at the house while Ferris is out. We also see his mom comes home at one point too to double check that Ferris is sick, and the mannequin fools her, which has this elaborated.
But it almost doesn't fool her
Yeah, it almost doesn't,
because she
but
she
they
closes the
have
door and
this.
then has to go back in to double check again.
Yeah, it works though. Like he has this setup of all these strings and pulleys that makes the snoring start on the machine while his character while his mannequin is laying there. Um, this is something that's referenced in a few things. This is referenced in an episode of The Office. Michael makes one of these to get away from not doing work. He thinks that'll that this will work. Um, so this is one of those things that the movie is kind of known for.
Real quick,
But then Ferris, yeah, go ahead.
anybody who has parents or anybody who has kids out there, if your teenager is snoring like this, you need to take them to the doctor immediately.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
they might need a
I
CPAP machine. They
I
might
don't
have some
really
issues.
snore.
I had a CPAP machine, saved my life, and it gave me a much better night's worth of sleep.
Oh
Um,
wow.
so, but yeah, if he's snoring like this audio system is showing Bueller snoring, and he's 17, like
Yeah.
yeah, he needs to go. He needs to go get a sleep study done. You need to take him to a doctor and figure out what's going on because his health is at risk.
So then we have Ferris in the parade, and while they're going to the parade is when they end up in a cab right next to his dad again. And then they quickly duck down, and it's Sloane wearing the sunglasses of Ferris Bueller to.
Here's my question about that. So it's established that Sloane and Ferris are dating, your boyfriend and girlfriend, right?
Yep.
his dad doesn't know what his son's girlfriend looks like?
I think it's a very real possibility. Um,
Now, depending
so
how long
my
they're
my
dating or something,
brother-in-law
maybe, I guess. But
my brother-in-law is a very notorious closed book type of guy where I don't really know if his parents, my in-laws, have met any of his girlfriends. Even long-term ones, like they just like he doesn't really. He's very private in the sense of he doesn't really say like, "Hey, I'm going out with Susie. Can't wait till you guys meet her," or anything. So uh, his parents don't even know if there is Susie. Sometimes they'll hear it from a cousin or from a friend, type of thing. So I do think it is possible that Ferris and Sloane are maybe recently started dating and not like a long term thing yet that his dad hasn't met.
I'll give you that. It may be a recent thing, although she's talking about marriage already, right? So that's a little weird. But they're in high school.
I feel it's very high school though. Yeah,
That's a
I
high
feel
school
like
thing.
that's
I get
very high
it.
school.
But also, as outgoing as Ferris is with everything in his life, like,
Yeah, yeah.
so another thing young people might not know, we see several references to get well or get better Ferris. It's on a water. They painted it in a morning on a water
Save
tower,
Ferris.
right? It was on the outside Wrigley Field,
Yeah.
on the scoreboard there.
Scoreboard like the yeah.
Uh, some people might be wondering, how did it get in the paper? That doesn't make any sense. Now,
Was it a midday issue?
that's what I was going to bring up. See, a lot of people may not know. In the heyday of newspapers, sometimes there were two separate printings. You had like an overnight printing for your morning newspaper, right, where that was all everything that happened overnight, whatever, up until their cutoff time, and then the presses were still running, and then there might be like a 12. There was a midday issue, like 12 or 1 o'clock, that would have different stories and updated stories
Yeah.
and different
One that you
news.
would read in the morning with breakfast, and then a lot of times there was an evening post type thing that you would read uh, over dinner.
So yeah, the fact that I'm just bringing this up because a lot of people might be wondering, like, that makes no sense. How did it make the
Yeah.
paper before that he was sick, before the paper even came out? That might have been a midday issue. That probably was a midday issue because this is mid to late afternoon.
Yep.
Was dad's in the cab, and yeah. So all of a sudden, what did it say? It's school teenager sick or something. I don't know.
It was like students. I think it was like students raising money for sick student or
Yeah,
like
something like
something
that.
like that. Local community worries about sick student. Yeah, something like that. So they go to the parade, and Cameron is thinking that Ferris abandoned them. He's like, "This is what he does. He abandoned us." Blah blah blah. And Sloane's like, "He's probably just around here somewhere." And then he's up on the float singing "Donka Shane" and then singing "Twist and Shout."
Which
So this is something you've probably seen before, right? Or some sort of clip or something.
it is. I did not know until this movie when I watched the credits because I knew about the end credit scene. This was like the first movie that I can ever really recall having an end credit scene, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and it has the end credit scene, and the scene was there was another scene playing as the credits were coming up. When it got to the songs, I didn't know the Beatles sang "Twist and Shout" until right
Yes,
now.
it is. It is a cover. It is not like an original for them. But yes, this was. I know. I used to always upset my grandfather because he'd ask me my favorite Beatles song, and I'd say "Twist and Shout," and he said that's not actually a Beatles song. I'm like, they sang it, and it's in Ferris Bueller, and that was why it was probably my favorite at the time. But, um, yeah, that's John Lennon singing and Ferris lip syncing to it.
Well, I didn't know that was a Beatles rendition. I didn't know who played it because I was actually curious when I was like, I wonder who sings "Twist and Shout" because I'd never known that before. And then when I saw the Beatles, I was two things hit me. I was shocked, like, wow. My next thought was,
Hmm.
how much do they have to pay for that song?
right, to get it in the movie. Um, yeah, let me see who the original singer of Twist and Shout was. Top Notes, the Top Notes in 1961
I think I also found
sang
out it
it
was
as
a
well.
German band who sang the "Oh Yeah" song because I had to look that up. I was like, who sings
Yes,
this damn song?
yeah, this is probably the biggest legacy of this movie is is this. Just this opening here with the that is the legacy of Ferris Bueller, I think too. It is something that people know the song. That's probably the only reason this song is well known. Honestly, I
I
feel
remember
like,
from like a Milky Way commercial or something too.
and I feel like that's probably why though. Like I feel like they used it because
Oh
of
yeah,
Ferris
it, it,
Bueller.
it gained popularity because of Ferris Bueller, without a doubt.
Yeah, it was also used in The Secret of My Success in 1987, starring Michael J. Fox. And it was also part of She's Out of Control, a 1989 comedy, and Opportunity Knocks with Dana Carvey in 1990. Um, yeah. So since then, of course, it's been in a whole bunch of stuff. It was used in a Domino's commercial in 2017 that references Ferris Bueller. It was used in Captain Underpants and Spider-Man: Homecoming. Spider-Man: Homecoming, of course, has a huge homage to this movie with the running in the backyard scene that Spider-Man does
Did it use the
when he's
same
leaving the
music or
party.
no?
I believe they used the same music. They definitely even used footage from Ferris Bueller. One of the people that he's passing by is watching Ferris Bueller, like same scene while he's going across.
Because I know Family Guy did a parody of it too, with like Stewie or
Yes, yes,
somebody running through yards
yes. It
with the
was
music.
Stewie. I forget what episode that was, but he definitely has the same exact thing.
Even stopping with
Um,
the two women or the two girls there.
yes, but yeah. So that OES scene is something that is very well known. It's played at, I believe, in the beginning and also at over the end credits. Or it's played sometime in the movie and then over the end credits as well. Um, but yeah, so this song took off after it appeared in the film. This was a song in 1985, and then just became a little bit bigger. Music video didn't premiere until 1987, I think. But yeah, so that's that. So we had man, I accidentally clicked off of my movie page. Okay, here we are. So after the parade, where he's almost caught again by his dad, his dad's listening to the parade while he's working
And
in a
he ends
building
up
above it,
dancing to it.
dancing. And then they go back and get the car, and Ferris notices before Cameron, uh, as they're driving, he looks
Okay,
at the odometer
if
and
you're
he's like,
Ferris,
what?
if you're Ferris, are you saying anything here, or are you trying to slip it back without
No,
note without?
no, you're not. I'm not saying anything, at least until we arrive, because you can't do anything while you're driving.
Yeah, you're gonna take like even earlier where he's like, oh, we'll just put it in reverse and roll it back, and I'm like, that's never gonna work. It's not how car odometers work at all. Like,
I know that's what I that's how I thought they worked though from this movie. I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure that'll work, but then it doesn't work.
and then and then he's like, oh,
Break the glass open.
we'll just pop it out of the dash. I'm like, you're gonna take a Ferrari out? You're gonna take a Ferrari apart and like
Yeah.
like there's finely tuned machines that do this. Like this comedian Roy Wood Jr. talked about, he had a podcast for a while and he talked about when he was in college. Yeah, he did some things, and his plan was he was gonna order different parts of a Mercedes and get them shipped to his college, and then he was gonna put the car together after he ordered all the parts separately. And like he got laughed at like by the people on his podcast because they brought the same thing. Like, there's finely tuned machines that put these cars together in like exact ways and specifications, and you're just gonna start ordering. Like you're just gonna order the front bumper and start ordering parts from there, like piece
Right.
by piece, and put a car together.
That's funny. Yeah, that's not something I would attempt. I'm not very handy when it comes to cars. So they go back to Cameron's, and he's in a catatonic state here,
How rich
where
is
he is.
Cameron's family?
I know. You got to think they're up there, right? Because they live in a nice suburb. I mean, even Ferris's house is nice, but Cameron has a nice house overlooking like this view, and then they have like the Ferrari. They have another sports car in there, and then they also have,
The
you would assume,
jacuzzi.
Cameron's car, and then whatever car his dad actually drove to work too.
Yeah,
And then they have a jacuzzi
and a
and a
pool.
pool.
That's a custom built house. That's not just like a regular cookie cutter
Yeah,
suburban home. That's like he went specifically to an architect and either had him design him a house or like said these are the things I want and worked with a guy specifically to have those a garage like that and those windows and up on the stilts overlooking things like that is not cheap.
yeah. Still cheap enough to go to public school though. So then they're swimming, and Ferris is, worried about Cameron a bit, but Cameron just jumps in, and you think he's trying to darkly here commit suicide. Um, Ferris goes in and goes after him, saves him, pulls him out, and Cameron's not responsive until he laughs and says, "The Ferris Bueller, you're my hero." Um,
You know what this reminded me of?
what?
Cheating from the good place. This broke me. I'm done. That was
Yeah,
that was Cameron's. This broke me. I'm done. The
yeah,
dot.
because
That
kind of
was
the
his dot.
undercurrent throughout this whole movie, throughout this comedy movie, is the bad relationship between Cameron and his dad. He's so scared to take the Ferrari out because of how his dad's gonna react, right? He says the dad loves that car more than me, type of thing. And uh so they're in the pool while they're trying to roll back the mileage, and when it doesn't work, Cameron uh kicks it, right? Cameron goes on it. This is the symbolism of the bad relationship with his dad here, is this car. This is the thing that's gotten in the way of that. And he kicks it a little too much. It goes speeding backwards the outside of the house, the garage. And Ferris is like, this is probably the moment we really see Ferris as like actually being a good friend here, is when he says, "Hey, blame it on me. I'll take the fall. Like it doesn't, like this is my fault." But Cameron knows that he can't continue living like this. He says, "I have to have a talk with my old man, and this is, we're going to have a conversation."
I don't think there's gonna be
We
a
don't
lot
know
of.
how that went.
I was gonna say I don't think there's a lot of conversation there, especially considering this is the '80s and child abuse was not looked at the same way as it is today.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that could have been a very one way conversation, unfortunately.
Also very 80s is Sloane saying that she was like purposely undressing, putting her bathing suit in front of him because he was catatonic, right? And she said, "You saw me when I was changing then, didn't you?" And he gets like a little smile. This is very 80s. This would probably not fly today. This
Can we talk about Sloane and the actress who played Sloane for a second?
Yeah.
She was in a couple of things because I had to look her up. She was in Time Cop, but I haven't seen her in much else. I was just like, man,
Yeah,
that.
surprisingly. I felt like she was very I thought she was very good in this.
I thought she
She
was
was
good.
super young.
I thought she
She
was
was 18.
beautiful. Yeah, she was only teenager, like in the actual teenager.
Yeah.
Um, she had a great look. She's very beautiful, and I was just like, why haven't we seen more of her? And then there really just was no reason. She's done some stuff, but it wasn't like that upsets me. I don't know why.
Again, it's kind of a theme we've talked about with this. At some point Hollywood just kind of spits out these women when they get older. They say we're not giving you any more roles until you're like a grandma, and then we'll give you the grandma roles, and that's
Or
pretty much what you become.
or if you're like Jennifer Grey and get a nose job, and then all of a sudden you get cast in nothing after that.
Yeah, I feel sorry for Jennifer Grey because I feel like her I thought she looked fine with the previous nose.
Yeah,
So I feel sorry that she felt like she had to do it. I mean, I guess whatever makes you happy. I don't know. I didn't realize she was married to Clark Gregg until 2021.
but I've read that
Who
it
plays
wasn't
Coulson.
it wasn't totally her choice. Like her parents and everything wanted her to do it because they felt she wouldn't be. Their words. They felt it was too Jewish looking, and they felt it was.
Uh,
They felt her original nose was going to stop her from being cast in a lot of stuff. And she is in her memoir and stuff. She's come out and said she has since regretted doing it, obviously, because she said like almost overnight, like everything dried up, like she lost, like everything just stopped. She said she wasn't even recognized at like a premiere she was from a movie she was in after she got the nose
yeah,
job.
she looks very unrecognizable. I mean, I can't like when I look at the picture of her now, I can't see her. You know what I'm saying? It is crazy. Because she was very like what else? She was in Dirty Dancing right after
Yeah,
this.
and
When
that's
was
what
the nose job? Do we know?
I think it was after Dirty Dancing because that's when everything kind
That's
of
what I was
dried up.
thinking. Yeah, that's a shame.
It is. It is. I thought she was very beautiful. I thought she was fine, but I
Yeah,
wasn't an '80s casting director in Hollywood, so what do I know?
right, right. Yeah, um, yeah. But Mia Sara is who played Sloane, and she was really great in this. And she, look, one of my childhood crushes. Right.
I can see. I can understand why. I can definitely see why.
And I always really liked actually the chemistry Cameron and her have as well in a way that is very like good like they're good friends. Like I feel like she actually cares about Cameron. There was times where you don't get that with Ferris, and Ferris at some point is part of this day that he's taking off here is I think he's maybe I'm reading a little too deep into it. He's kind of thinking about what is to come. This is one of the last times he's going to be able to just kind of do this whatever before he has to set on a path of what
Yeah,
do I do after this.
especially considering
You
a
know,
lot of people go to different colleges, so you might not. Who knows when you're going to see some of these people later again?
and he says Sloane only still has another year until she graduates. So he's like, all right, do we? It's kind of alluding to him of do I would marry her. He says that, but he's also like she's gonna have to stay here for another year while I go and do whatever
Yeah,
he's going to do. It's a very high school thing. Um, it probably feels low stakes now when you're watching the movie, but back then that would be such a when you're that young, it is kind of like a thing that you're
no, something like
thinking
that is
about. Now,
huge.
yeah, I mean, I didn't have a relationship at that time, but when I stayed home for school, I went to a local school and commuted. But when I met my wife, we met on a blind date in February of 2013. And we started talking and then actually started dating in May of 2013. And at that point, I already knew I was going down to Disney to work for an internship. So we had conversations before we became like official, quote unquote, was I said, I'm not going to like get into a relationship without like thinking that this can be something real, that this can be something long term. So I was kind of saying to her that if we do date, that time in Florida is going to be like long distance, which it was. That was, in our first year we had to deal with 5 months of long distance relationship, but it was like we were both committed to we're going to take that seriously. I'm not entering in a relationship thinking that this might only last 6 months. I went into that relationship thinking I want this to work. I want this to last. So, that was a big deal for me at that time. I'm sure now people would look at it and just say, it's not like a super high stake thing, but this movie was relatively low stakes. And that's kind of something I was talking about when we said that we don't get movies like this. We don't get a lot of movies anymore like this where it is just kind of a fun thing without huge world altering stakes. A lot of stuff now, like we said, were franchises or horror movies or um, something that's a little deeper than just kids skipping school to have an experience before they might ultimately go different paths, which is what they don't really ever settle that. And I think that's fine because I think that it's nice the way it is to just know that this is what they're thinking about on this day. Like I'm glad they don't fast forward to Ferris's like graduation day or anything. Like I'm kind of happy with the way that this movie ends. But yeah, just something that I kind of related to with his thoughts on Sloane and him. So then he takes Sloane home after they leave Cameron, and this is kind of where he is going to think, okay, I got to run back home. We knew he had to be home by 6. He mentions that to Cameron. He says, "What? I thought we had until 6." You know, because Cameron's saying, "Hey, we should get this car home."
Yeah.
He was starting to freak out. Well, I'm assuming because their parents get off at 5 and probably an hour commute, 6 o'clock. So he starts running. He doesn't have a car, obviously, so he has to run home. And we're not sure how far Sloane lives, but
It's enough to make it in 5 minutes or less.
yes. And he runs out and almost gets hit by his
Sister.
by his sister driving his mom.
After sister made out with Charlie Sheen.
Yes, and kind of has a great conversation with Charlie Sheen, who knows Ferris as well, apparently.
The cops even know
Of
Ferris somehow.
yes, yeah, tell your son we're all
Just
pulling
the whole
for him or
station's
whatever.
pulling for him. Like, what the hell's going on?
Not the reason you would think the sheriff and stuff would know about Ferris. You'd think he's gotten in some trouble or whatever, but no, it's for the save Ferris. Um, but she has a great conversation with Charlie Sheen a bit, where who has plays a small bit role in this, where she kind of goes through about her frustrations with Ferris, and this is the turning point for her when she is going to vouch for Ferris. I think is this, and then seeing Rooney again at the end is gonna kind of what makes her vouch for him. But at first she sees him, her mom doesn't see him because of the papers going everywhere, but they both give a look and they know the race is on. She wants to get home and prove that Ferris wasn't there and he needs to get home. And this is the infamous scene then where he goes cutting through everybody's lawn. He grabs the guy's drink, right? He like you said, he stops and goes back. I like when he goes back to the women sunbathing. He says, "Hey, I'm Ferris," and jumping on the trampoline, going through the person's house. He even goes through somebody's house and says, "Dinner's ready," and then just like books it. And he gets there. He's going to get in there in time, but Rooney is actually who's going to
Got the key.
got the key
After
under
his
the mat.
car's been towed, he lost his shoe. He's been
Yeah,
attacked by
he
the
looks
dog once.
disheveled. He got beat up by Jeannie, right? Didn't she hit him?
Yeah, she kicked him in the face.
Yeah. But this is when, she's waiting by the back door for him, knowing he's going to come in that way. And then she sees Rooney, and this is when she's going to open the door and be like, "There you are," and kind of vouch for Ferris and reveal the wallet
Yeah.
being laying in the house still. Um,
Yeah,
and
see,
then the Rottweiler wakes up again.
I think at that point, I think Rooney realizes, like, I'm just screwed. They're like, I can't even pursue this with Ferris anymore because,
They have this over my head.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jeannie knows that I was inside their house. And this is not going to look good. Especially, I don't know, 35 years later when, some stuff comes out about me. Yeah. But,
Yeah, yeah. So Ferris gets back upstairs, gets in bed, and then a nice little bit of tension here where you think everything's fine, but then the snoring machine is still going, and he has to hit it with the baseball perfectly as it bounces back in the glove while
That is
they
the
open up
most
the door.
80s stereo system as well.
Yes, yeah.
Like you had to have
We used
separate
to have something like that.
yeah, you used to have separate components for everything. Like a separate receiver, a separate amplifier, separate record player, separate component for a tape deck, speakers. And also
Yeah.
the MTV intro in the beginning that actually played
Hmm.
music videos. Yeah, just peak 80s.
So I think his dad even says like maybe you should take tomorrow or something. Um, they're gonna make him some soup, and it's kind of the end of the movie here, and we get to the credits, where the credits are mostly playing to the "Oh Yeah" song, and it's Rooney walking away. He's bitten, like he's got bloody ankle, and the school bus pulls over. They recognize him, and the school bus driver offers him a ride. And um, again, maybe not the best in today's climate now with what we know about the actor that I did not know. But yeah, he goes through the back of the bus. Everybody's shocked to see him and shocked at how disheveled he is. And he sits down next to a girl that is offering him a gummy bear.
That's been in her pocket, so it's nice and warm.
Yeah, gross. And then we get a post-credit scene of Ferris coming out of his bedroom, looking at the camera and saying, "You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go." And that was the end of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. All right. So, talking about memes that came from it, I don't know much, but obviously big pop culture references now of the Bueller scene with Ben Stein. Save Ferris is, shirts that you can buy in Target and stuff. There is, like we said, a few references to the final scene when he's through the
Yeah.
um, running through the yards. So
There's the
lots
saying.
of
There's the saying. Life comes at you pretty fast.
yes, yeah.
That
That's something I've posted before or said before. Yeah.
which I mean, I'll be honest. I've heard the saying before, but I just never really paid attention to it. And then I don't know, just kind of once I watched it today, and kind of after watching the movie and listening to it and looking at like Cameron, I kind of get what he's saying. Maybe it's a little different for me now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very real saying when you know, with how fast life does go, and he gave Cameron. Could be also called Cameron's Day Off. He gave Cameron a day that he'll probably remember, and some very memorable stuff, other than
We'll talk about that here.
dealing with the dad.
We'll talk. Well, actually, since I think next is ratings, let's talk about that now. So,
Yes, you mean the theory that goes around? Is that what we're talking about?
no, no. Uh, a lot of people ask why wasn't there a sequel?
Mm,
So I looked it up. John Hughes, before he died, he had some thoughts about doing a sequel, and he was going to do it like maybe college or like when he gets first gets out in the workforce. But Matthew Broderick started doing some other stuff, so he could just never get around to it. Unfortunately, fortunately, John Hughes is no longer with us. Uh,
yeah.
the guy who plays Cameron has brought up an interesting thing. He says that if they did one, what he would like to see, and I think it could work, is Cameron is in a nursing home, and Ferris breaks him out for like one last day of one last day of shenanigans. Like breaks him out the nursing home for a day. And I think that could work. Or like maybe like Cameron's kids or his grandkids or something could break him out for like one day because they've heard stories about Ferris, and maybe during the course of that we find out what happened to Ferris and if he ever married what's her name, and if his friendship with
Yeah.
Cameron kind of stayed. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever get a sequel, unfortunately.
No.
Um, but in 2022, Paramount said they were coming up with something. that was going to focus
Yeah.
on which it's original. Okay, it's original.
Sam and Victor's Day Off, I was going to bring this up, was announced for development for the streaming service Paramount Plus, taking place during the events of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, but focusing on the two valets who took Cameron's father's Ferrari on a joyride. I don't know how much this could work.
I think it's an
Uh,
interesting concept. I think it's interesting, and like I said, if you want to go sequel, Matthew Broderick's still around. The guy who plays Cameron is still around. Like Jennifer Grey, like you can work with them and come up with something, right?
yeah, yeah.
And especially maybe if you tie with like grandkids or something, like there's different ways you might be able to incorporate family and friends. Obviously, the principal is probably not going to be involved in any sequels, but that's okay, right? Like
You would hope not too, just for the fact of like they're out of school. What do you need the principal for?
you never know. I hate to say it. I think even maybe just like a quick cameo, if they did a sequel, like a quick cameo, I think might be appreciated for fans of the movie.
Yes, yeah.
But like, I don't think he needs to play a big part in it. But just like, oh hey, isn't that is something like that? But that's a whole nother topic that would need to be discussed, and you'd have to bring up to the cast and crew if they were comfortable with it, with everything that happened. But I think it's original. Like, okay, you got these two dudes who went off on this adventure, right? They put a couple hundred miles on this car in a couple hours. Okay, they make it back in time. They seem like they had a blast in their day, right? So yeah, what happened during their day where they had this Ferrari out there, and maybe it doesn't work. Maybe they weren't able to come up with a story. Maybe it never made it past the development phase. But I like the idea that they were trying to think of something original. Like, okay, we can tie it to Ferris Bueller, but these two guys were just weird, and like, what happened? What did they do? So I like the idea of like, okay, it's something different, and let's try it. Maybe it didn't work, but
My whole thing is I just felt like they were always supposed to just be doing a joyride, so I feel like I don't know how much you can do with that, but I'm sure then they can make them go to all these other places or whatever. But my worry would be one, like two, how do you set this movie up? Right? Like, do you use archival footage of them dropping off the car, but now you put the new actors in there? Or are you getting the older actors and de-aging them? Like, what are you doing? Like
I
that's kind of something I don't know how that works.
I think you could get some people with makeup and prosthetics to try and recreate the younger actors, right? If they are still around, I think you might even be able to get the older actors because they were a little older than Cameron and Ferris, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they're in the nursing home and they're talking about their day that they had
Well,
40, 50 years ago.
one of them is still around. One of them passed in 2019.
Oh man,
Richard Edson is still alive. He's 70 years old though, but he was the one with like the meaner looking face, I guess you would say, like the goatee,
yeah.
long hair.
If if
He's the one still around.
if you could get him, maybe he's in a nursing home talking about his wacky. So you could have like him at this age, right? Um, talking about this wacky day he had back in 1985, which was like 40 years ago. Okay, maybe you use a little archival footage, or maybe you just pick it up where from the time he gets in the car with a younger actor playing him and takes off, and you don't have to worry about using older footage or trying to recreate. I don't know. I think there's ways it could be done. Like I said, it's probably not the greatest idea in the world, but I got to give him credit for at least trying something new and different instead of like, oh, let's just remake Ferris Bueller's Day Off completely.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so I feel like a sequel couldn't work. The closest one would be probably what Alan Ruck said, right? Because it features Cameron heavily. Because I do think what works about this movie is Cameron and Ferris's relationship. and Cameron kind of being like Cameron's the one that really goes through the journey of what a hero would usually go through in the movie, not Ferris, right?
Yeah,
Ferris
Ferris didn't
usually
learn any lessons whatsoever. He learned
he
nothing.
did not. He did not. So one thing that I see Matthew Broderick say is, we thought about a sequel to Ferris Bueller where he'd be in college or at his first job, and same things would kind of happen again, but neither of us found a very exciting hook to that. The movie is about a singular time in your life. It is about the week before you leave school. It's about the end of school. In some way, it doesn't have a sequel. It's a little moment and it's a lightning flash in your life. You could try to repeat it in college, but it's at a time that you don't where you don't keep. So that partly is why I think we wouldn't couldn't think of another idea. So I do think that they are correct here that it is about that moment. And I actually never really growing up like ever thought of like, oh, I would love to see a sequel to this. They did try a TV show though
Yeah,
in 1990, starring Jennifer Aniston actually as Jeannie, by the way. And it was back before he graduated. This takes place like I don't know if it was supposed to be like a prequel. It was a non-canon continuation, they say. Um, so Ferris apparently refers to the film and expresses his displeasure at Matthew Broderick portraying him.
yeah. He takes like a chainsaw to like a Ferris
Yeah.
Bueller cardboard cutout or something.
But it's him in like junior year of Ocean Bay High School, which is a different name. I'm guessing they moved it to California or something instead.
I
But
think
it got canceled after 13 episodes.
I think if anything, the only thing that could work is maybe, like I said, what's it? Cameron's maybe in a nursing home, and either his
Yeah.
grandkids or like maybe even Matthew Broderick and Ferris come back and kind of give him one last day. Maybe he's. I hate to say it. Maybe I hate to bring up something more. But maybe he's terminal, right? And he's in hospice
Mm-hmm.
care or something. But maybe they give him like one last day.
You could play it off where he's like, "I'm dying," and Ferris is like, "You're not dying." He says, "No, I
No,
actually got the results.
and
I'm
and,
dying."
and like there's a doctor there or something. You're like, no,
Yes,
he's really dying. Like, yeah, I think something like that could work.
that could work. Yeah, but I feel like without John Hughes, it would not be as good.
You know what would be cool if they did that, and this is probably just me going way too far, because I guess all these movies are in the same universe. So
Yeah,
if you're gonna do that, give me like something from like a little tidbit from one of his other movies here or there. Like, let me see Molly Ringwald,
yes, yeah.
or like Judd Nelson, or like somewhat like just like throw something from one of these other movies in there as they break Cameron out for his for his weird day off or
Yeah, like
whatever.
one of the other characters from like Breakfast Club is there. Or
Yeah,
16
something like
Candles.
that. Like let me like Ali Sheedy pops up and she's like an
Yes.
investment banker or something now, and everybody's just like if you're gonna do it, you have to honor John Hughes in the right way. Um, and that might be the only way if something like that would ever even come about.
It's crazy looking at his filmography, by the way. It really is. He wrote Vacation in 1983. Okay? 16 Candles in 84. Breakfast Club in 85. European Vacation in 85. Weird Science in 85. 86 was Pretty in Pink. Ferris Bueller's Day Off. 87 is Some Kind of Wonderful and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. I mean, he was just churning out movies.
And this is either handwriting or on a clunky typewriter.
Yeah. He wrote Ferris Bueller in weeks. I think he wrote it in, what does it say here? He wrote it in less than a week, this movie.
Like,
So
you actually have to line the paper up and clack, 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 zing, clack, 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 zing.
yeah, I would assume he probably hand wrote it maybe and then gave it to somebody to type it. Who knows? I mean, because I feel like you'd work faster handwriting and then having.
Possibly. The
All right.
only issue
Anyway,
is
let's.
depending on your writing, like if people can interpret it.
Yeah, yeah. Back then, I feel like people had better handwriting. Mine is awful now because I barely ever have to use it. Oh, also, just like there was a fan theory out there before that Ferris Bueller doesn't exist in Cameron. It's all in Cameron's head.
Yeah,
Enough with that stuff, please. That feels like it's like when something enters the public domain, Casey, and then they immediately make horror movies out of it. It is like the
Steamboat
most.
Willie.
It is the Winnie the Pooh. It's like the most bottom of the barrel theory idea you can have. Is either
Enough
it's all a
people,
dream or they made it up in their head.
enough people have interacted with Ferris Bueller in this movie for that to not even be anywhere near the case. Like, at least if you look back at, say, The Sixth Sense, right? You can, maybe you don't catch it the first time, but the set on repeated viewings, especially after you know everything, you can maybe acknowledge and look at the fact that, like, nobody has interacted with Bruce Willis's character in The Sixth Sense,
Right.
right? But the first time you watch it, like, you're not really picking up on that. It's not until later when everything comes together where you're like, oh, that is weird. But I'm not like enough people are physically talking to, touching, interacting with Ferris Bueller for it to not be like, oh, he's a figment of his imagination. Dude, like we talked about, this principal had a thing for him. His principal called up his parents.
Yeah.
He went face to face with him in the very end because he thought he finally caught him. Like,
Yeah, it's I don't know. Like I said, people have done the same thing with like Rugrats with Angelica, like that all those babies were actually dead and it's just Angelica having a crisis and so
Jesus,
weird.
that's
Weird
dark.
that people like to go that way. Yeah. All right, let's get to ratings. Rotten Tomatoes, 82% critics, 92% audience. Cinema score was an A minus. I was actually surprised I was able to find a cinema score for some of these older movies. IMDb is at 7.8. Metacritic at 61. It had a budget of $5 million and the box office made $70.7 million.
Wow, for back in '85, that's pretty good.
That's good. Um, I rate this, of course, a 5 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed. This is the first time I watched in a few years, by the way. So it felt nice to kind of revisit it. Um, there are some things now that I feel like I'd probably dock points off for if I was not nostalgic. And like you said, the dog just being introduced out of nowhere. Um, some stuff like that. But all in all, 5 out of 5 for me. Casey, give me your rating.
All right, so I think having to put aside the issues with the principal, right? Because that was not known at this time. Can't
Yeah,
hold
at
that
this
against
time they did
anybody.
no clue.
Can't hold that against anybody. Um, uh, like I said, the one small nitpick I had was just the dog, and I know that's a silly nitpick of like, so there's this random Rottweiler that we've never seen or heard in the house at all, but uh, the '80s were definitely a different time, obviously, but it was, as someone who lived through the '80s and lived through a lot of stuff like this and lived through MTV and lived through seeing a lot of this stuff in real time. Um, it's a little nostalgic for me too. Trying to push that to the side, I can acknowledge that John Hughes was great at what he did. He made some fantastic movies between writing and directing. He was an American treasure, and
Prolific, I would say, probably, with the
he
amount he churned out.
he truly was a national treasure. And
In like
I
10 years. He turned out like a bunch in 10 years. That's
I don't
crazy.
I don't know. He's the kind of person, honestly, I look at it now. I wonder if he ever got like the Presidential Medal of Freedom or anything like that because of the amount of contributions he did. I doubt that he did, but I think looking back at it, some of us will probably say he probably would deserve, you know, some acknowledgement of what he gave to our childhoods and adulthoods for people around then. I'd say this is a 4.5 out of 5 star movie. I kind of wish I would have seen it earlier. Like I said, I've seen bits here and there. I can understand why people love this movie. Um, and yeah, I that and I would also, if it was on sale, like if I was scrolling through Amazon and saw it
Oh,
like
yeah.
the Blu-ray like
$5.
on sale for like $5 or $10, I might be pretty tempted to be like, I can waste $5 or $10 on that.
I'm a little surprised actually because I felt like once I'm revisiting and if Ferris is a little shit, I was like, oh, I don't know if he's gonna like Ferris as a
He
little shit.
is, he is, but sometimes I mean, there's just people like that out there in life that just get away with everything.
Yeah. Ultimately, he doesn't do anything like super bad though either, right? Like Ferris, I feel like
He's just manipulative. He knows how to get his way. He
yes,
knows how to get his way.
yes,
And you know what saved it too? I don't know if he meant it or not, but the fact that he was willing to stand up and take the blame for the car.
yes, yeah.
A
That's
lot of
probably his biggest growth, but like the biggest growth is through Cameron. But yeah,
yeah, but and Cameron was able to grow, but the fact that he was willing to stand up and be like, you know what, I kind of push up to all this. I'm willing to take this and deal with the consequences. Something like that helps as compared to like someone who's just like, oh, that sucks, dude. I got to be home in 5 minutes. I'm gonna check you later. And roll out the door.
crazy. He was only 59 when he died. John Hughes.
How old was he when he
Damn,
made these movies? Like 20?
he graduated school in '67, so I mean, he was pretty young when he was making
I
these.
thought he died just within like the last 10 years.
2009 feels like 10 years, but it's almost 20.
He graduated
It's like
high
15
school.
years.
You said he graduated high school in 57.
Actually, it says he was a junior in 1967. It has this high school picture here. Um, so he dropped out of University of Arizona and then started. Uh, so he started working in like the 70s, and then was break had his breakthrough with his first screenplay in like 82.
He couldn't have been 50 when he died. Then the math's not mathing on that.
59. 59. He was born in 1950. So he was making these movies. This movie, he was 36 making this movie.
Okay, I was trying to figure out the
It's
math there,
crazy.
and I'm like, something's not adding up.
Crazy how many times he was like. That's very young to be that prolific too. I mean, that's insane.
Well, I mean, also,
All right.
I guess maybe his movies weren't expensive to make. Like the Breakfast Club took place in like a library.
Yeah, Breakfast Club's budget was $1 million.
So I think if you look at it, the teen comedies back then, teen comedies were probably a big thing. Like you said, this one had a budget of 5, made 70 million, right? I don't think he
Yeah.
had a lot of big stars at the time. I think a lot of them were younger and up and coming stars.
Yep.
So
His
they're
first directing gig was 16 Candles. Before that, he was just writing. So
so
yeah,
it's fairly cheaper to get everybody. Like I said, his budgets probably aren't too big. And then you look at the returns on the box office, like I can
yeah,
understand why they
you're
would keep
making
going
money.
back to him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all the way up to his last movie was a movie called Just Visiting in the year 2001. It was written by him, but his last directing gig was Curly Sue in 1991.
Oh wow, I never watched it, but I remember Curly Sue.
Yeah, man, he even wrote Beethoven, the movie about the dog, in 1992. And he wrote the first three Home Alones, of course, and apparently wrote the story for Made in Manhattan with Jennifer Lopez. I did not know that.
Jesus.
Didn't write the script, but he had the story of it. Okay. Well, that's John Hughes and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. So, Casey, what are we watching next week?
We're gonna stay in the 1980s next week. So we're gonna go during a dark time in our lives. 1987. We are
It's a dark time in my life. I wasn't even alive yet.
there was a void in 1987 because we were 4 years past the Return of the Jedi,
Mm-hmm.
but we were 12 years away from the Phantom Menace. So we had no Star Wars
Yes.
in our lives. The only Star Wars that was going on was then President Ronald Reagan talking about a missile
Yeah.
defense system that was named Star Wars. We're gonna go to the films of Mel Brooks. We're gonna
All
watch
right.
Spaceballs.
Spaceballs, I guess. Yeah. All right. So we're I was gonna say 3 comedies in a row, but no, we did Gladiator and Spider Verse too. I was thinking Austin Powers, this and that. All right. So Spaceballs. Do we have a? Let me look to see where that's at.
It is. I think it's streaming on a couple different platforms. I had seen it, and I just hadn't. I did double check to make sure.
So it is currently on Max.
Yes.
All right. So
As
there
of
you go.
this recording.
Spaceballs.
As of
As
this
of this
recording.
recording. Well, we're no longer like 6 weeks
Yeah.
ahead, so it should be still streaming on Max by the time we release this.
But still, 2 weeks can change a lot.
Yes, it
Like a
can.
week or two can definitely make some changes there. So.
All right, so we're watching Spaceballs on Max next week. Thank you all for watching or listening along with us. You can follow us on all of the socials in the show notes below or in the show notes of your podcatcher. Make sure you rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. Spotify allows rating now as well. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll catch you next time for Spaceballs.